Interesting. I'm about to start working on this social procurement project, and when I wrote about it, I called it community benefit purchasing, because I was like, if community members are looking at this potential funding application, they're not going to know what social procurement is. And so it's like this term that we wanted, this concept, what social procurement is, right? It's choosing to invest your own money and buying, you're buying power. You as an individual, you as a company, you as, wider. It's spending it, in a way that you can invest in value. Like, how would you talk about that? How would you talk about social procurement in like a non-fussy, languagey way?
The easiest one that directly correlates to is just buying local and supporting independent.
Yeah.
Just say those things and mean it, and then find out what it means, right?
Yeah.
So when we're doing our cooking classes, like I said, those CSA boxes come from farmers who are doing it hard but know what they're doing. That's social procurement.
Totally.
Right? So I hate that. Whenever you can unjargon something, do it.
Yeah.
And when it feels like, when it doesn't hold enough weight, it does. I don't know. I've seen people come from being incarcerated for most of their life. I've seen people coming from street entrenchment, developmental delays, physical and mental diverse abilities who found their passion and their purpose in work.
Yeah.
Because they want to be able to be in service. So I circle all the way back to say, being in service is how you find your purpose. What is it that you do? So I have a Venn diagram that I like to use. I won't draw it because that's not helpful right now. But imagine, okay? So this is the first circle. Yep. And the first circle is, what is something that you're good at, that you love doing, not a job you once had or something somebody told you were good at, something you like to do. That's the first circle, right? Identifying what that is. And so people automatically defer to what they get praised for. Don't do that. Like, right. What do you like to do? I like to play basketball. I like to cook. For 20 years, I was not known as a cook. Now I'm known as a chef again because I love cooking, right? But I decided that. And so you move towards it. You put energy towards it. The second one is, what do you care about? And that question like gives everybody I don't know, you got nothing but time to think about that right now. What do you actually care about?
Yeah.
Right? What is it? And people are like, I really care about abandoned animals. I'm like, awesome. Service that. Because if you don't care about homelessness, that's not a problem. Like, that's okay. I'm sure you care at some level, but that's not where you want to put your energy. No problem. Because you being halfway into trying to do something over here is not helpful when you could be all the way in over here. So those two things that combine, right? You've got a skill that you love, you got something you care about, and then the third one is critical. How much bandwidth do you have for it? How much time do you actually have? Don't bullshit yourself or anybody else. I'm going to do this every Wednesday. No, you're not. No, you're not. I mean, maybe you are. Don't let me get this wrong. But like, or what can you really do? Because if somebody said to me, Chef, I can donate 1 day a week to review all of your social streams and provide some feedback or something along those lines, I'd be like, that sounds really reasonable, and let's give it a shot. Now, you as a person, knowing that you're helping our trajectory, that's really great. You're really good at socials. You really care about poverty and food. Those three things you show up, and then the organization can appreciate you back. Mm-hmm. Figure out where it is that you sit in the center of that thing. Start to do a little bit of volunteering. Find out what you're really passionate about, and just take your time. Mm-hmm. I always say the problems are so urgent, we have to slow down. Because if you run at something half-hearted or half-baked, this is why we have now every emergency room in North America triaging with Subway sandwiches that are poison.
Yeah.
It's not helpful. Everybody thinks they're helping. Coughing all over sandwiches and delivering them to hospitals. Like, this is what happens when you're like, I'm passionate about this.
Yeah.
And then we were like, how about ambulance drivers? Don't say that. Paramedics. Like, take time to figure out design and like, what is it that I want to do with my life? Because then as you try to raise funds around it or try and get people behind it, your message is so clear and concise. Your purpose is so clear and concise. You know who you're serving. And all of that research is free. It's free to ask people questions. Be respectful about it. Reach out to people you'd like to support. Volunteer time that they need, not that you want. Like, figure out what that looks like. And then it's really, you'll find your way amongst it for sure. Like, it's not a maybe. I love capitalism questions, so I'm going to dive right into this one too. We live in a capitalist society. Yeah, we do. Capitalism is an economic model which assumes private enterprise produces goods and services. Is there an alternative to capitalism? Have I heard the term community economics? I have, and I appreciate the question immensely. What are the alternatives? We're living in the alternatives. We essentially, as Canada, decided to institute universal basic income 4 weeks ago. We said, hey, here it is. EI now has no barriers. Everybody get money. Oh, that's not enough? Cool, here's CERT. CERT's UBI. That's what it is. Like, everybody can get this money. Now they're like, ooh, maybe we could subsidize wages too. Up to 75% if you had lost revenue. Wait a sec, are you talking about a living wage? It's also UBI. So we're testing out things that aren't traditional capitalist models, right? What do we need all these reserves for? What are we doing as a government? Where are we spending our money? Where are our businesses being taxed? Where are they not being taxed? Right? So when we start to look at these brackets, we're going to understand in these moments of real desperation, who's holding all the chips? Why do they have the chips? Is this the way this should work? Wait a sec, if I just have goods, can I just trade those for other goods? Yeah, you can. And time. So there's the great experiment of time banking that we got into in like 2009 or 10 with a group in Holland that were actually working completely, their whole community was run by time banking. So their whole community was devoid of, and it wasn't a lot of people, I think it was like 300 people, was devoid of money. And they just literally helped each other out in a way of like, I paint, that's what I do, you farm, that's what you do, et cetera, et cetera. Off-grid communities exist everywhere, and they were our communities, period. Yeah. Right, so that's a little far-fetched for people who are like, yeah, but I have a rent and other things. So there is other ways to have a look at the way things work, right? So there's alternate currencies, there's all kinds of other things that are very prevalent in our mind right now because capitalism does not work.
So we're in Vancouver. I am the founder and the CEO of Embers, which is, in the broad sense, it's a community economic development organization founded in 2001. And in 2008, we launched a social enterprise, which was a temporary labor company. And that's what we were interviewed for initially with a social shift. And that temporary labor company, it's a not-for-profit. We are a charity, but it runs as a business. And the reason we set it up is because we're located, our head office is in the downtown east side, which probably everybody knows about the downtown east side, even if you're not from Vancouver. So it's, one of the poorest communities in Canada, but, there's a lot of different types of people living there. And there's a lot of, people with drug addictions and mental health and people coming from other places. It's the place where you live in what they call SRO, single room occupancy hotels and that kind of thing. But it's not all one type of person there. There's a lot of people whose lives are in transition in this neighborhood. I'm not a person that has these sort of goals and then I'm going to become a doctor and then I, take the steps to become that thing. I'm more about following a journey and I'm a great believer in that. So, so who am I as a person? I'm a person who grew up in the 60s and kind of rebellious, a person who broke all rules. And even today I break rules. I have to have hire people in my organization to keep rules and make rules because I'm always breaking them. So, you know, that's can be a problem, but it's also who I am. So, you know, I've always wanted to be outside the box and that kind of thing. So that, you know, and then, you know, growing up in the 60s, the whole social movements and that kind of thing. So, and I think I always identified, even though I grew up in a middle class home, I, you know, was a bit of a troublemaker, you know, in the old days. And, you know, I think that I identified with the underdog and that kind of thing. And so there was just genetic, it's instinctual. I'm not sure. Maybe I was rebelling against my parents. Not sure, but it all kind of became a social thing, a social movement thing at some point. And so in university, I studied community, was actually urban planning. I wasn't interested in becoming your traditional planner. So I was interested more in communities. And then one thing led to another. And, when I wrote my thesis and then later a book called No Place Like Home, Building Sustainable Communities. And it was very, it was looking at, it's a vision, and the vision is still very, I think, real today. I mean, a vision is a vision, right? It is a real thing. And it looked at globalization, even before computers and the internet and everything. It was looked at globalization, what was happening, corporate globalization, and how we were being taken away from our communities, how communities, the structures of communities were being disassembled, and people were becoming disassociated from a sense of place, because as people moved from place to place and capital moved, and corporations, everything, our focus became out there. And in fact, I can't remember exactly the opening line of my book, but it came from an ad that I heard. It was like the Holiday Inn saying, you can travel around the globe and never leave home. And it struck me that I wasn't sure that was a positive, because what does home mean when you can be anywhere and you think you're home? It's just like a corporate image. And so what is the true meaning of place? What's the true meaning of community? And you could see how communities were being destroyed. And the more you destroy communities and the structures and the cohesion that really have kept people together for thousands of years, it's a real concern. It's still a concern for me. And so then what happens is that you don't even see who's in your community anymore. Who are your neighbors? Who are these people that are being left out and being marginalized in this big process? And so the journey really is to try to create models that will bring back a stronger sense of community. And that's where social enterprise, that's where if you want to put the Embers Staffing Solutions, which is an on the ground experience of creating employment and work and meaning for people who are marginalized, in the bigger, broader picture, it's about creating a sense of place and community and well-being and looking after the people who are here. Well, I haven't had people, because we're a charity, at our foundation, nobody's going to criticize. In fact, we might get more criticized for making a profit by some people, because we come from that charitable, background. But we do, let me turn that around, our partners, our customers, they themselves, they're in it for profit. They're the construction companies or whatever the companies are, the manufacturing companies, they're in it for profit. So for us, the challenge is actually turning them, selling them on the model that for one thing, that they're not going to get lesser than or less quality. In fact, get better quality. If you think about it, people who are who have changed their lives. I don't know if you know anybody who's gone through a lot of transformation in their life and they're really committed to making a difference. They're some of the best people in the whole world and some of the hardest working. And so they're actually getting the best in some ways, and people who are motivated. So they're not getting lesser quality, although, you know, hiring people at risk sometimes gives you that feeling. So there can be that, you know, reluctance. But when they start to work with us and then they feel, oh, gee, I'm not spending any more. My purchases are actually creating social value. And most people get it, you know, and many people have people in their families, you know, their brothers, their sisters, or even themselves with backgrounds and that. Most people can relate to giving people a second chance. So, but you have to kind of tap into that and assure them that they're going to get the very, very best. And we have to work twice as hard as everybody else because we have to prove that, and give them great service. And when we see, say, a contract comes our way and we think, well, that would be better suited for another social enterprise that we know, we pass that on. We work together. It's even in, you know, the nonprofit sphere, where nonprofits can be quite competitive with each other, and certainly businesses can be cutthroat. I don't see that in the social enterprise. They're actually very supportive of one another, and you know, we give contracts, they give us contracts, we work together on things. You know, that's the way that's a different way of doing business. Location is different because there's a local economy that's different. There's a culture that's different, and we'd have to take a look at that. You know, the supports. I mean, I've talked to Marc about that as well. I mean, it's very unionized in Ontario, at least in Toronto, and sometimes unions don't want to have our model, which is, you know, transitional temporary labor, because it's not a unionized model. Right. And so you have to work those things out and how that fits in. So it you know, all these things, but there, you know, it's a model that works, and there's always people in communities that need that kind of gradual back to work. And you know, I get visitors and calls from around the country all the time, and happy to share how we do it and that kind of thing, you know, because there is a demand and there is a need.
So my name is Marc Soberano. I'm from an organization called Building Up and also Raising the Roof. I work in Toronto and run a trades-based social enterprise that takes on construction work primarily in affordable housing type projects, and uses that as a way to connect the work in these buildings to the people who are living in the buildings. And, you know, why are there towers that need so much work at the same time that people living in the towers can't seem to find work, right? So our goal is to kind of connect the dots on that, and then to really connect another dot, which is that there's, you know, hundreds of employers in the city looking for tradespeople, and there's hundreds of people looking for work. So we're also trying to connect the dots on that and use these projects as a way to train people, get them working, get them experience and working in these careers. So they were actually just, they kind of like bombarded that procurement fair. We didn't even know they were going to be there. It was, and I just had a nice chat with them. But I mean, so that procurement fair that they were at was really like an opportunity where, you know, there's all these organizations in Toronto that are making all these large purchases, and our city's trying to put in place a social procurement policy. So they were trying to introduce the people that are doing the procurement with the people that have services to procure. And, you know, those sorts of relationships have been really big for us as these like larger corporations start to think about how they could spend their money more intentionally. And our kind of pitch is like, if you're spending money anyway, and we can prove to you that we can do this in a way that kind of gives you the service at the price that you need it to, like, and hire us, like grow up and do it, you know. It's like this is the right thing to do. So like those relationships from events like that are really important right now. And like that film is, it just, you know, sometimes you say social enterprise and people think you're talking about like Facebook or Twitter or something, but it's you know, people just don't realize that when they're hiring someone to renovate their floor, they could actually be doing something positive, you know. And that like every dollar we spend can be a vehicle for like the things we want to see happen in the world. And I think that's kind of the social enterprise. I think that universities are large institutions that procure a ton of services. We're currently supporting York University right now, who's working on a social procurement policy, and I think they're going in a really good direction with it. So it's looking likely that either us or other social enterprises will soon be involved in a lot of the work that happens on campus from a trades perspective. But then these universities also have these massive, you know, like catering, you know, food plans. Like, can they involve food-based social enterprises? You know, there's cleaning, there's a lot of printing.
What kind of contract would building up take on at York? Like, just give us an example, maybe.
I mean, I hope pretty significant ones. So yeah, it could be like redoing a bathroom. Maybe it could be redoing the flooring in a full building. I don't know. Like I mean, I don't think we're about to like build a new building for them, but they also have campuses that would probably need a lot of in-suite work. So yeah, there's a ton of options.
From your involvement with them, what's the current barrier? Like, what's the barrier that has stopped you guys? So what's the policy work that needs to happen so you guys could take on work?
Well, I think that they're public institutions, or I think because they get a lot of public funding, there are certain procurement kind of requirements that are needed. So any kind of deviation from that kind of standard process would need to be done through like a different policy that's been approved. So the main thing has just been them kind of working through their policy and making sure that they do that. And I think they're like doing it properly and like trying to get a lot of input on how to do it. I mean, in theory, there's no reason why we can't just win a bid through their normal process. We haven't really attempted that with them until this is happening. But yeah, I think it's always good when they kind of, if you're trying to procure a service, then it's like sometimes people just measure price, right? Or like price and quality. But then there's also like the price, quality, and like what the organization's about, right? At some point, like if you're gonna value like only the cost of something, then you're not really valuing like the full service. I'm not saying that we should be more expensive, but I think if somebody actually wants to support the community, then should at least be open to entertaining that if that happens to be the case on a certain project. And I get that it's not always going to work out, and like I'm not saying that people should be paying us way more than we need to be competitive. I feel that, but I have a kind of different, it kind of happened way differently for me. Like I can barely screw a light bulb in. Like I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I went to business school, and I took a class on social enterprise actually, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know it existed, but it really jived with like kind of what I was about, and I found it was like the only course I took in university that I at all like cared about, and I really just found myself like being really inspired by the businesses we were learning about in that class, and sort of just kind of caught on to it and tried to just learn it. And then I met Sean, who's the guy in Winnipeg that started the first trades-based social enterprise, which Building Up is based off of. And I had heard him sort of say that he didn't necessarily want to. Someone asked him what he would want to do in 10 years, and his answer was, I don't necessarily need to be in charge of all this, but I would love for this to exist like all across Canada. Then I was just like, got it, okay. And then him and I kind of hit it off, and I was like, I think I'd like to give this a shot in Toronto. And he put me up at his place in Winnipeg for 3 weeks, and I just kind of followed him around and learned what he was up to, and then came back and gave it a shot. I think like what drew me to it was that, you know, business and the way that we operate as a society kind of like has caused a lot of challenges like that across the way that our community works. And then it's like, oh, it seems like those are the same tools that should be the ones that fix it. You know, how can we use these same tools that are causing issues unintentionally as a way to solve them, because that's the way that our world works, you know. So it just, this model of, you know, people needing to do energy efficiency upgrades on their homes, not because they care about the environment, but because it saves them money and they're paying for this work anyway. And affordable housing buildings, there's all these people in the buildings that need work. You know, they've got a waiting list. Why would they not try to get these people jobs? And then so they can move out and like grow their lives and bring the new people in. And it's like, it's just made so many sense on so many levels. And it just really felt like something that I could dive into, you know, and then just sort of happened. The way that we frame the work that we do when we're kind of out sharing it with people is very much like, I try to explain it in ways that it just is sort of, it doesn't really matter what your values are. It's like, you kind of put people in a position where it's like, of course, you know, so it's sort of like, you're spending this money anyway, why wouldn't you? Or like when I'm speaking to employers that, you know, have very non-diverse workforces currently, you say, okay, you're looking for people for your business to help you. You can't, everyone's leaving your job. Wouldn't you rather hire people that are specifically looking for these jobs and have spent 6 months already like getting ready, understanding what it means to show up on time, understanding like what this career could do to their lives? Like, it would be helpful to you if you were to hire people from our program, you know. And like social procurement has that same kind of one. Like all of these things are a way to frame, just kind of make people realize that there are like social solutions to the issue, to the business issues that they're having. I would say that.
So you're saying like, you don't need to align with my values. This is the smarter business choice.
Yeah, like the first type of business that we got into was changing these toilets. So we would go into buildings and change all their toilets to new ones that use less water and save them a ton of money. A lot of the buildings that we were doing this work in were like total slumlords who didn't care at all about anything other than their bottom line. And they didn't even know that we were a social enterprise. They were just hiring us to save money on their water bills. And then, you know, that kind of is what it is. It's like, okay, great. Like, we're here to get people working. Like, I'm going to share it with you through a lens that works for you, you know?